Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're basically stepping right into a time machine, heading back to a very specific, surprisingly quiet window of history. We're going to be looking closely at the daily life of the Seaver family. That's Fred, Betty, and their baby boy, Randy. The setting? Twin Oaks Avenue in Chula Vista, California, and the timeline is right between February and April of 1944. Now, there are no massive world-changing headlines generated here, no dramatic crises for the evening news. Instead, we're looking at a life that is intensely, beautifully ordinary, right smack in the middle of the third year of a massive global war. It really makes you wonder, right? How does a massive global conflict change the value and, honestly, the fragility of just simple, everyday routines? When the world outside is completely chaotic, the ordinary becomes something to be held carefully, sort of like a precious object you suddenly realize might not last forever. Let's dive in and see exactly how the Seaver family balanced this incredible reality. Section 1. The macro. The war machine's shadow. Picture this. Every single morning, Fred Seaver kissed his wife Betty goodbye, stepped out of his peaceful, quiet home, and walked right into the grinding gears of wartime industry at the Rohr plant. And this number up here, 50, really illustrates the sheer scale of the world he was walking into. Rohr was pumping out more than 50 B-24 bomber power plants every single day in 1944. I mean, that is just an enormous number. Fred would occasionally pause at his desk, buried under requisitions and supply manifests, just to try and comprehend it. Every single one of those power plants was going into an aircraft that would fly over something that really mattered. Now, Fred's work wasn't exactly glamorous, sure, but he was an absolutely essential part of this enormous, necessary machine, untangling complex supply chains with a really elegant logistical mindset. But, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the creeping anxiety of the draft board. The draft was calling up men with increasing consistency back then. Now, Fred was 32, and his work at Rohr actually provided a war production deferment. But as the theaters of war kept expanding, he knew that essential industry status wasn't a silver bullet anymore. It wasn't a guarantee. He watched the numbers, he read the daily papers, he literally knew men at Rohr who had gotten their notices despite their age and position. And this is where it gets really interesting, how the couple actually dealt with this looming reality. Sitting on their back steps in the mild California dusk, Fred opened up about his reluctance to leave this beautiful life they'd built. And Betty, with just this characteristic, incredible, practical grace, comforted him. She listened, she didn't interrupt, and she simply said, "If it happens, we'll manage it." And it hasn't happened yet. She hit the nail on the head. She acknowledged the uncertainty perfectly without letting it rob them of their present moment. And that creates this profound contrast living under one single roof. On one hand, you have the macro scale of Fred's wartime logistics, right? The bombers, the massive supply chains, the terrifying draft board arithmetic. And on the other hand, you have the intimate micro scale of Betty's daily life, which was structured entirely around baby Randy's feeding schedules and developmental milestones. It's just a stunning balance of two entirely different worlds existing side by side. Section 2. The micro. Milestones in the nursery. So while the war was quite literally raging globally, Randy's rapid development gave Betty this mercifully predictable structure. Tracking his progress over these 3 months is just fascinating. Take February. He practiced rolling over with this intense, focused determination. In March, he started forming actual consonants, playing around with sounds like ba and ma from his crib. And by April, boom, he was triumphantly sitting up without support for a few seconds at a time. Fred affectionately joked that Randy observed the world with this concentrated, studying look, like absolutely everything he saw was deeply worth understanding. Section 3. The Fern Street Sanctuary. Every Sunday afternoon, without fail, the family found this incredibly grounding refuge at their extended family home on Fern Street in San Diego. It was a true sanctuary of normalcy, built entirely on rich sensory details. There was the familiar, comforting creak of the third step. There was Georgiana and Emily immediately scooping Randy up to dote on him. There was the garden, which was kind of Lyle's particular kingdom, where he handed Randy a handmade wooden rattle and introduced him to the greenhouse tomatoes. Randy even got to practice that intense focus of his by tracking fish from one end of the goldfish pond to the exact opposite side. There's this one detail that absolutely gets me every time. It's the interactions with Austin. Now, Austin was grieving, and usually pretty formal, a bit stiff. But around Randy, all that containment just vanished. He'd hold the baby in the crook of his arm and talk to him in this low, unhurried voice about the old days in California. Fred quietly watched this happen once and whispered to Betty, "He talks to him like he's a person." And Betty just smiled and replied, "He is a person." Austin was speaking to this tiny baby as an absolute equal, passing down history to the newest generation. Section 4. Community Under the Clouds. Well, beyond their own family walls, the Sievers actually kept up a really vibrant social life. And this is even as those unspoken rumors of a massive military push in Europe started gathering like dark clouds. Yet their community brought immense joy, and honestly, some pretty great quirkiness to their lives. During a monthly Saturday evening visit to the Chamberlain house, teenager Marcia Chamberlain whipped out a notebook. Get this. She was scientifically tracking Randy's development. She was cross-referencing his milestones with a library book and proudly reporting that he was doing everything right and, hey, maybe even a little advanced on his social skills. All of this amazing community spirit really culminated on a mild spring Saturday in late April at a local Chula Vista park. Just paint the scene in your mind for a second. You've got the Sievers, the Stedhams, the Tazalars, and the Lyonses all gathered together. The menu was an absolutely perfect snapshot of a wartime larder. We're talking cold chicken, deviled eggs, and a chocolate cake produced through what was mysteriously and probably accurately described as creative rationing. Meanwhile, Randy is just chilling on a blanket, eating mashed banana and receiving the public like a visiting dignitary. Now, while the guys were enjoying the simple, purely physical pleasure of tossing a baseball back and forth in the warm afternoon air, Fred just sat back on the blanket beside his son, and he watched this incredibly quiet, fleeting little interaction unfold. A butterfly landed right near Randy. The baby extended this imprecise, wobbly arm to reach for it, but the butterfly fluttered away, right before he could make contact. And Randy? He just pulled his arm back and studied his empty hand, silently filing that new information away. Fred just sat there, resting his hand on his son's solid back. He looked out at the park, at his friends throwing the baseball, at the brilliant blue San Diego sky hanging above all of them. And right there, amidst the insane bomber production quotas, the terrifying draft board arithmetic, and a whole world literally engulfed in war, Fred had this profound realization. He suddenly understood exactly why this fragile, completely ordinary life was so fiercely worth holding on to. Looking at the scene, he just thought to himself, remember this. As we wrap up this explainer, I think the Siever family in 1944 leaves us with a truly powerful reminder. Even in the massive, dark shadow of a global war, the rhythm of daily life, a baby's milestone, a shared picnic with friends, a quiet afternoon in a garden, carries immense enduring weight. So I want to leave you with this question. What ordinary, everyday moments are you holding on to in the midst of our own chaotic world? Take a moment to really reflect on that, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.